Thanks for coming back, guys. This is part 2 of Making the Universe Alive.
Yes.
Yeah,
I'm Ken here.
Yeah, I've got my good friend Ken.
Yes.
We had quite an interesting conversation. We had to cap it off for an hour. Usually, when we have these conversations, we goes all day, all night type of thing.
Yes.
We reached an hour. We realized, we should probably stop at that point.
Yeah.
So we're thinking let's have another at least short session, just to sort of recap or sort of finish the last few points and just put a nice bow tie on this topic. So what you might remember is we spoke about how can humanity essentially conquer the entire universe.
Yes.
Realistically, we got up to our local
galaxy.
Yeah, our local galaxy cluster.
Which will take, as we discussed, about 1,000,000 years or two.
At least, yeah. I mean,
just
conceivably 1,000,000 or so years.
Yeah. Just by calculating the distance and how we can travel around the galaxy. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and we spoke about robots, different types of biology, like different evolutionary lines of humans in the future. But a few things we didn't touch upon, right? Well, like aliens. We didn't really touch upon that because it was actually further down the list of what we want to talk about.
Yes.
And then we actually did have quite a list of few hurdles, interesting things to talk about, like what are the technological ones, what are the societal ones, the genetic modifications. What would it mean when we start tinkering more and more with our DNA? This is starting to happen now in the world. We're getting better and better at modifying, like the genome of viruses, bacteria, and it's all happening faster and faster now over the next 10 years.
There's also some cultures who are choosing their babies to specific characteristics, which they can do. If they get like from sperm bank or egg bank, they can choose which characteristics like.
Or they're looking at the DNA of the sperm and egg.
No, they just look at the. I kind of looked into this. So they looked at the race of the person. So if you're an Indian couple, the Indian couple will look for a sperm or an egg that's an Indian in ethnicity. So their children will kind of look like them.
Oh, but they're getting a donor, not their own.
Yeah, donor. So some couples who can have children, they can choose to have a child with donor sperm bank or egg bank, and they can choose certain characteristics like the race of the person, the donor, and then also like the eye color, height. They can actually choose, which it is not 100% choosing, so it doesn't mean that you will are guaranteed to have a certain height if you pick that certain sperm or egg, but there are some ways that people are already doing it.
It's a lot more likely. That's super interesting. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
that's like stage 1. That's sort of like
that's very small stage
selection. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like artificial selection that we do for animals and farm animals.
And then it's going to be GMO humans.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, the whole entire ethics board of scientific community say no.
But this is
no
like
widespread alteration of human genome, which is unethical.
Exactly. Yeah. But I think one thing we spoke about after we finished the last session was like the time spans we're looking at is quite a big deal.
Yeah,
I think
it's massive.
Yeah, for us when we said it's like it would take just 1,000,000 years or so, that order of magnitude, like that's to us it sounds like a short period of time because the universe is like what 14 billion years old, give or take. Like 1,000,000 years is nothing compared to that. And so now if you look at like the industrial revolution from that to now, and even from farming to now, which is 10,000 years ago, like it's just a tiny blip. So now if
even compared to the Earth geological timeline, it's a very, very short.
It's nothing. Yeah.
Our recent uprising is very, very short.
Yeah. The point I wanted to make was like even though ethically we can say no to GMO humans, no to GMO cattle, no to GMO whatever.
Yes.
In 1,000 years, I mean, the odds are it would have happened, like whether you like it or not.
No, it would happen very gradually, but by that point it would be normal because we treat certain things as normal that 100 years ago would like, oh my God, like for example, birth control is one thing. Like birth control pill was was invented 1970s and 60s and late 60s, but because of that, now we have like women can go to work, women have a lot of access of control of their own pregnancy and biology. But before that, that was impossible, right? I mean, there are ways to do it, but it's not clean. But because of that, like many of the norms are more normal. Like for example, casual dating would be unthinkable in the past, which means because you're gonna end up with a baby, right? If you're not careful before the birth period develop. So now those things are normal, that we consider as normal. Wasn't like that before. So perhaps same could be said for GMO humans, like genetically modified humans who, if in the future we have been, selecting over time, and then become more like, of course my children can have blue eyes. It's fine, it's normal. So it's, you can.
I reckon, to me, what it sounds like, if you link on this topic slightly more, and we are talking about more Earth now, and even though the topic is a universe, the point is that this forms like the trajectory. Like if you look at like a plane flight, it's sort of like that initial ramp up.
Yeah.
We're talking about this so that to get you to see what does it look like for the plane to start flying off? Because as soon as genetic modification start, that is just a sort of big shoot up into the star stuff.
Once we relax our constraints,
we're not for or against. I'm not saying I'm for it. I'm saying I can see this.
It might happen in the future. Yeah, because we can't foresee the future. For example, we can't foresee 20, 30 years ago, nobody foresaw the internet would come. Nobody foresaw the rise of smartphones. Like it was unthinkably unexpected. So things could happen in the future that we couldn't foresee.
If it does happen, one possibility I reckon is it just takes one country.
Nanotechnology, another thing.
Yeah, let me just finish off this point. It just takes one country, for example, to start maybe.
Probably China.
Could be, right? Yeah. They might say, look, let's stop genetic defects. People born with any type of sort of genetic diseases. Let's sort of fix it up, stamp it out.
Down syndrome.
Even Alzheimer's or any type of like diseases and whatnot. Let's stamp that out, and then one other country will follow, and then another country will follow. And so, even though right now, we say no to all genetic modifications, in 100 years, the countries that allow it to stamp out birth defects or any type of health problems, they may say, actually, it's unethical to not do it. So after 3 generations, ethics would probably change.
You can make an argument that if the child is born, not capable of being independent, because of mental diseases and brain diseases, because of genetic diseases, basically, it's ethical for the child to not be born. You can make the argument that it's not to be born for the parents' sake, because the parents has to take care of the child for the rest of their life. As long as the child's alive, you can't just terminate the child the moment it's born. So perhaps choosing to abort the child if you know that the child will be born with such defect, or choose a type of genetic egg or sperm that's perfect, or the person who will be born will be normal and independent. So you can make that argument.
Yeah.
And some countries might do it. And for example, with China, right, who is has a very unbalanced population ratios, and they might have ideas about what is a perfect child, because when they had only one child policy, right, they had to the parents choose to have sons, right, because there are many advantages in the Chinese culture to have a son. So because of that, because it's a cultural choosing, so a lot of millions of people choose at the same time. So now a generation later, there's like 70% or 30% ratio, right, of men to women, and as a result, there are a lot of weird cultural things emerging. For example, a lot of weird pornographic emerging, or a lot of games that are catered towards men who can't find a wife, who can't find a partner, because it's when you have 70-30 ratio. Like you either travel abroad to find
Mathematically
someone.
impossible.
Mathematically, it would be extremely tough, and the fact that women are very, very choosy partners, as they naturally are, and they will not just choose anyone. They'll choose the one they really love. They want to choose who are, will settle down and have some money and stuff like that. So the rest of the men, like, can't find anyone. So there are markets which are arising that sort of suited to their needs.
Yeah, so there'll be a lot of interesting societal changes. So let's go back to the topic. And
let's go back to the topic. Yeah, I went off the topic.
we tend to link, sort of diverge off. But okay, in terms of going off into the stars, the point behind this is space is like a very tough environment to live in.
Extremely tough. The most toughest ever.
Yeah, currently we're going to be, probably over the next century, we'll be figuring out medicines and whatnot, and even routines and exercise regimens to do in space to help us survive there and have good health in space. But probably we'll figure out at some point over the next several hundred years at least, like some genetic changes that just allow us to not need any of that medicine.
Yes.
Right.
Not just to ourselves, but to animals,
animals,
which are more likely to happen.
Even like bacteria, to make our food. I mean, and like over the next 1,000 years, probably, I reckon humans probably won't look that different. But then you project that out to 10,000 years, you can start seeing bifurcations. There could be a community somewhere that just goes down one genetic route, another that goes down different, and then by the time they meet, we're completely different species. At some point, that would be super interesting.
Yeah, if a certain culture live on a different planet and have their own genetic modification rules and whatnot, and have their own ways of doing things, after a certain amount of time, they will become a different species. That's how the naturally.
That's how it works. Like speciation.
Yeah. The same thing happened when the Native Americans in the American continent, right? They were separated from the other continents of humans for a very long time, right? Until Columbia and everyone, the explorers, just rediscovered the place. Otherwise, if they were not rediscovered, they would have become two species of humans. If it took a few more thousand years, if the American continent and the Asians and the Europeans were separated for a long time, because they were for a long time, and then if that was the case, it would have been two different species of humans. But now it's not, because now everybody. I mean, most of them died off because of diseases. Unfortunately,
it tends to happen. Unfortunately,
yeah.
I'm very interested in like the societal changes. So like back here on Earth, we're talking about like gender imbalances and what it means for society and culture and all of the norms that we have.
Yeah. Knock-on effects.
Yeah.
Effects it can have.
Yeah. What do you see anything that could happen in, like, just say there are a large number of different colonies of humans, just maybe just our own solar system, for example. I reckon, for example, that people with different, like, each colony would have their own personality, in a sense. It would attract people of a specific type. So one could be, maybe the ones like further out are more people that just like prefer to be alone. They could have very few and far between. I don't know. Yeah. Mars could be, I guess.
People born alone would just stay on Earth. They would never leave.
I don't know.
But the first explorers are always, personality-wise, they're always very extroverted. They're always very highly risk takers. They don't really care about their own life most of the time. They're very, very risk takers because the rewards are massive when you take a high risk, high return, right? So there are people who would love to have that adventure, and then those are the people who go out into the stars in the beginning. But when they have children and their grandchildren,
5 generations down the line,
then you're gonna have more diversity of different personality types, like like introverted, other types, and stuff like that. So, but in the beginning, it's always the first explorers were always.
I'm really curious.
Very sociable.
I would love to be like a fly on the wall.
It's a generalization, of course.
Yeah, I would love to see what cultures come about, because if you,
let's say you live on Mars or another moon, Europa or Enceladus, right? They have a different kind of climate, different kinds of water type, for example. What if they start to choose a type of characteristic of the next generation to be more resistant to cold climate, right? So perhaps that child will have more hair than usual, a little bit more hair than usual, but down the line, 1,000 years later, that cultural norm would become
Or
humans who are very hairy.
Yeah,
right?
Because if you don't have hair, there's something wrong with you.
Exactly. Or there's something wrong with you, or because it's just not fit to live in that planet, right? It's the same thing, right? So perhaps they will start making those little choices down the line, but generations later, going to have huge knock-on effects, and they'll look different to us, for example. We will not know, but I think it's interesting to think about.
I think the only example I have in my head is like Britain, sort of ending. Well, yeah, you can argue Britain's colonies, like in terms of its own sort of culture, got transferred to Canada, the US, and Australia.
India.
Well, I'm talking about the people migrating out. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
In terms of like the actual British people migrating out.
Yes.
And it's so interesting to see like there are still cultural differences between just those three. You know.
Yeah.
Like,
Sometimes very big differences.
Yeah, and that's so interesting. But I reckon like it looks. I'll definitely reckon that in whatever happens in space, it's going to be much larger differences. So even people going out or from the same country, they just by ending up in a different sort of, you know, the moon, or Europa, wherever, even the space stations, you know, like it would be so different. Even
they would come up with certain rituals that would adapt to that environment. Yeah. We humans do that all the time when we go to a new environment that we're not used to. Like, for example, like, you know, we came from Africa, right, many thousand years ago, and then now we live everywhere. But the reason why we could live everywhere, most animals can't live everywhere. It's impossible, right? Because they have a certain type of niche that they follow, and they have a certain type of body type that almost perfectly suited to that niche. But for humans, what we do is we invent cultural technologies, basically rituals, stories, you know, writing, you know, all those different ways of doing things, ways of socializations that's perfectly adapted to culture, right? So even if you came from a warm culture and go to a cold climate area, that's just the society will slowly adapt to the cold climate, and the rituals will change. For example, right, in Sweden, in the northern part of the world, or south, much southern part, so the sun is different. But the sun goes out and goes
6 months.
Yeah. So sometimes in the winter there's no sun at all, right? In some parts of the higher north, and people have to adapt to that ritual, right? There's no light, so you have to make fire, and all the different rituals you have to, and then like even certain teenager rituals and adult rituals, many things. People come up with ways to adapt to that culture, which are vastly different from people who live in Africa, because, you know, even though we evolve out of Africa, now we're very different. If we look, you know, people compare the different climates and regions. That will happen. Probably that will happen when we go to different planets. A much bigger effect, as you said, like not just like culturally, but also physically, genetically will be different.
It's so interesting if you think about it. So like imagine 10,000 years in the future of like 10,000 years of living in space, say.
Yeah.
Right now, it depends, right? If travel back and forth from Earth is very commonplace, this will be less of a thing. But I can imagine coming back to Earth would just seem very quaint. Like, how are these Earthlings living on this planet? It's so weird. Because for us, if we go to Africa, it would look, oh, that's really weird. I can't.
Yeah, it's too hard. Or
too many insects, this and that.
Yeah, too many insects.
Yeah, it seems so strange.
And another thing we're not discussing is gravity. Other planets have completely different gravity, right? And people have to adapt to that gravity. And now we come here, maybe like, oh, they'll feel much heavier. Like, holy shit, you know, like, how am I supposed to walk on this planet, right? So people will physically
they probably figure out games as well, and they can't play those here.
Exactly, you know? and yeah, exactly. That's a cultural games are cultural technology. People come up with sports and games to socialize better. So that's the main point of it, for children to have fun. And so if you live on a gravity that's a third of the Earth, they'll have much more freeing sports. Right? Like basketball, you can just fly up in the sky, or like much higher than you can jump up much higher than you can on Earth. If you're playing basketball, right? So like, things like that. And then physically, people will change. Like their legs will start to look different, and their spinal structures will start to look different if you live on a different gravity for many generations. It will look different, because that's how it's we're going to be adapted to.
Do you reckon? I can imagine, like, at least for the foreseeable future, like anyone going into space being humongously like needing a lot of discipline and being very not risk of. You have to be a risk taker to go, but then like the sort of customs and culture forming to be quite risk averse because the environment
they need to have
is so
procedures
harsh.
to combat against.
That would leave a
risk.
cultural effect, I would reckon, right?
Definitely, yeah. Like it might become more militaristic, for example. I don't know.
So some people reckon like that's the only way space civilizations can start. Maybe not far in the future, but
tough force
initially, yeah.
Because people will misbehave.
Yeah.
It's always like there's always going to be someone who's going to break the rules, and then and that can have knock-on effect. Because if one person breaks the rules and the rest of the people see that they can get away with it, everybody will start breaking the rules.
And it'll be smaller colonies first.
It can literally kill the whole colony.
Yeah,
if it's
and you have
enough.
very limited resources.
Yeah.
Anything that breaks, Saba can risk the lives of everyone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So perhaps there might be militaristic cultural norms might come up.
Whatever starts that initially.
Yeah. So
right?
whoever have the guns have the most power. Like we can become even more like tribal times. Where the one who has the best weapon have the most power. It might follow that pattern again. Who knows? Yeah.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Another one we'll finish off in a bit. We promised ourselves 20 minutes. So I just want to sort of finish off on the cultural stuff.
Yeah.
Almost certainly by the time we actually start living in space, there'll be robots and AI.
Of course.
Yeah, like on the one hand, there'll be cultural shifts on Earth, but I'm trying to figure out how would it be different in space? We definitely rely more on robots and AI, both on Earth, but I think in space we'll rely on them for our lives, literally.
We have to.
Yeah.
They'll be more of a necessity. Would
we start seeing them as like a parent figure, like a mother or father thing, but maybe more but not telling us what to do, but sort of because if we rely on them for our
we might start have mythical stories about them.
Yeah, yes. After a while, right?
Like the first AI,
especially the kids rising up. Yeah, if the AI says go into this chamber because there's more oxygen, you just listen to it. I don't know. I have bad examples.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what's going to rise.
But when you have such close proximity to robots since you were born, right?
Yeah.
Until you die,
and you depend on it for your survival. On Earth, you can just whack it, right?
You can just go out and breathe air and eat.
You don't need a robot.
You don't need a robot.
But in space,
when the environment is so impossible,
probably you're not going to be allowed to damage the robots as well. Definitely, if we rely on them to go outside and get actual resources, even on Mars,
they'll be valuable.
Yeah. So they probably respect AI. I would reckon they'd respect AI and robots.
Not just respect, perhaps they'll treat it as if precious, very precious, and anybody who dare to do it will be heavily punished.
Yeah, and if that is the case, and coming back to Earth, they'd probably be really annoyed that humans, Earthlings.
Earthlings are just treating robots,
mistreating. How can you do this? They're literally doing everything for you. Yeah, that would be an interesting cultural thing.
Yes. Or people who compare, let's say we have smartphones now, right? And we depend on it all the time, right? Compared to another country who never heard of smartphones or never had it, they would just look at us and say we're dumb or we're weird.
Yeah, well, why
are you looking down on your little device when you could just look out at the mountains and breathe the air? They'll think we're stupid.
It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, why don't you feel the world? Instead of just looking at the little device. But we have reason to look at the device because it basically does everything for us. Shopping, ordering food, talking with people that our loved ones, it does a lot of things for us, and we of course we have to look at it. But they also have a point where we should actually go out and enjoy the nature as well.
Yeah, nice. Right. So we were just talking about how to make the universe alive. I want to linger on this topic that I feel like there's some untapped potential in terms of like talking points or interest. They're basically the economy, which probably doesn't sound like the most interesting topic to most people, but that is basically why we live in such luxury nowadays. It's one of the biggest, enablers.
Yes.
So I think we wanted to go like sort of give a speed run of like the past and like how we think some ways you can transition into the future, and how we can have a galaxy-wide economy.
Yeah. How can we have? Well, firstly, how can we have a big economy that can support our solar system itself? The trading between different planets, and then how can we do that on a much bigger scale between solar systems themselves, and then even beyond. So what kind of time spans are we talking about with economy trading? So it's very interesting to think about. Yeah.
So let's sort of
let's start from the past.
Yeah. So just a speed run, glossing over a lot. The start of it is basically just bartering. I mean, before bartering, there's no such thing as bartering. You're just living within a large family unit. Everyone's taking what they need.
Yeah.
You live in a larger and larger group. You start.
No. Let's start from the tribe, right? If we start from the tribe, and you go out hunting, for example, and you get a squirrel or a deer or something, but there's no refrigerator, right? There's no refrigerator, so you can't store the meat that's been hunted. So what you do is, the person who hunt the meat share the meat with the tribe. So that's a reason. It's called. They're trying to come up with a reciprocity ritual.
It's a very soft bartering. It's not.
Yeah, very soft bartering. They're basically trading meat. So I'll give you meat that I have lucky enough to get the meat now. I'll give it to you. But then next time when you get the meat, when you're lucky enough to get the meat, share it to me as well.
Yeah, but it's unspoken.
It's a reciprocity unspoken. So it's a
good example.
It's a reciprocity of time. So you're basically bartering time, and then when you trade between tribes themselves, that's when bartering becomes.
Because they're foreigners essentially to your tribe.
Yeah. So anyone outside the tribe is an alien type of mind, right? So that's an outsider. So what the outsider can bring us? Let's say the tribe themselves, they make nice clothing, right, with nice patterns, and then the other tribe make nice shoes, right, with nice patterns, and then they're like, okay, I'll give you 2 shirts and you give me 1 shoe, or vice versa.
Something like that.
Yeah, something like that. So that's a bartering, but there's no abstract currency to control the bartering, but it's only within people's minds how valuable it is. So if a pattern is very, very beautiful, very battery, so like a shirt is very, very beautiful, then I'll say I'll give you 5 shoes to get that 1 shirt, which look very, very, very beautiful. Right. So the value is only inside people's minds. Right. It's not really recorded in the currency. But then when you have bigger cities and bigger towns, that's when the influx of resources becomes so big that we need to have accounting. Accounting of how much of rice is coming in, how much of wheat is going out. Right. Where we need to have some sort of system. And the reason why writing was developed is not to record down our sayings. It's not that. It's to accounting. So writing was developed to the first writing that was discovered. It's just mathematics. It's accounting, right? Like how much rice is entering the kingdom. How much is going out. So they need to record it in physical form, so that there's evidence of things going in and out. And you need to record that, because otherwise you don't know how much the kingdom is doing or not doing well. And then beyond that is when currency started to develop, because in order to control that trading between a lot of people, thousands of people trading, bartering become unsustainable, because how can you trade 2 apples with 1 shoe and 2 shirts? And
you can't just have a huge, everywhere you go. Like a huge,
you can't have a huge
warehouse.
Exactly, people can't access to warehouses. So the currency was developed by
initially to sustain a military, right?
Yeah, the trading become much easier. So it's actually done by authority figure. So the king or the accounting,
Let's fast forward a bit faster.
Yeah. So and then once currency developed, like it's just explode out, right? So then like I'll give you that much money, and everybody understood, and then you go, and then that system developed for a long time, because it was very, very sustainable for
it's
for
so
big types of
money
trading.
is so useful that pretty much the entire world has picked it up, the concept of it, not necessarily what constitutes money.
Yes.
And um, we don't even think much of it now, and like
Yes.
we don't even,
now money looks completely different
yeah,
than
and if
before.
yeah,
Yeah, it's just electron trading at this point. But but once money more and more become abstract, so money now has physical form, right? In the beginning,
So what would it?
so it becomes salt. It was salt in the
Yeah.
beginning, and then became coins, right? And then
So-
became physical money, paper money. But the coins for paper money was huge jump because it allows our brains to adapt a piece of paper that contains value for the rest of the culture, right? So at 20 pounds, you could just rip the 20 pound, it would just be nothing. But in that specific culture, the 20 pound in UK culture, 20 pound means you can buy food, right, in shops. So that might it takes more abstract imagination for paper money to coexist with us. And then now what paper money, and then after that now it's become gold. Gold become the standards of the culture, currency. And then now it's not even that anymore. It's mostly like global
electronic.
trading itself
Yeah.
become the money
So
itself.
I want to sort of go off in a slightly different direction.
Okay.
So with the economy, it's sort of money is one component, but the other, arguably more important part is what people do. So now we've sort of come up to here. We can sort of argue about or discuss about different things that could constitute money, and I think we've given quite a large variety of things that has constituted money in the past. Those things can come back out, or we could have a cryptocurrency, which is just again entirely digital and perhaps easier. If you don't have to actually physically transport something. But now, once we get into space, right? Or as we're going into space, how do we bootstrap it so that we don't need a Cold War to fund everything out, right? One of the largest sort of drivers to allow us to go to the moon was having the Cold War. If the USR didn't exist, would we have gone to the moon? Probably not.
Yeah, because it was a competition between USSR and
Yeah,
the United
and as soon as
States.
it collapsed,
There was no
it stopped.
Yeah, the funding stopped.
Yeah,
right,
so if we get the economy and the money essentially correct,
yeah,
I'm not-
it's basically a competition between can capital system go to the moon or
On
can the
its own.
social communist system go to the moon? And communist system was the first the first
Oh,
person
yeah.
that went to space was from the USSR.
yeah, but
Right.
then the
So
US redefined it to be like a few kilometers high.
Of course.
So
And
by definition that we just changed.
yeah,
no, you didn't.
you're not technically out of the earth. You're just above the air.
Oh my god.
Right? I mean, that was just technicality. But anyway, the space race was a competition between the two massive empires, basically vying for the domination of the world. Right? So whoever can go to space itself basically dominate the world. Right? That's the mindset they were having at the time. And then the Kennedy had that mindset to fund the NASA, and he promised to the people
Huge
that like
amount of funding.
within 20
Yeah.
years we'll go to the moon. Like that's it. No argument, right? Because we're gonna beat the USSR.
But yeah, I would hope that we can, in the future, we can sort of go off and have further things happening in space without needing that kind of competition.
Yes,
Between
but competition does
countries.
help.
It helps, but
It
I would
did
hope
help.
if
But the
companies
contention, yeah.
and
But I mean, now there are ways that people want to go to space, but from a more startup culture. So startup cultures are thinking about
that's a lot better if they
yeah.
can.
So startup culture, even SpaceX was a startup in the beginning, right? And like perhaps startups about space hotels, startups about mining, and then all those space related startups perhaps would.
So the first companies that we might start seeing, I think, listening on that point. So whatever starts out first is going to be like a building block to everything else.
Exactly.
And in a sense, however they conduct business in space,
Yes.
is going to end up determining the laws and the laws, regulations, as well as customs and even best practices and standards for everything else that follows.
Yes.
And the things at least I can see and make sense to me is with what you've mentioned is what hotels and anything to do with entertainment, really, hotels and vacations. The space mining makes there's a huge amount of sort of focus on that space mining. The logical next step to space mining is space factories. Like if you're going to have the full resources, maybe just build it there. So we've got hotels, space mining, space factories, but also
Space research.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. So,
So-
there might be companies that do research in space,
Mm.
and then they sell the knowledge back, as a way of
On Earth, yeah.
yeah.
And then initially, most people are on Earth, so we probably send stuff back down. But then as people start living out in space, all of these few things that we mentioned can start being built out further and further, so that we start building entire space stations in space. We start building anything that's needed for Mars.
Yes.
You know, we build directly in space. So then that sort of could bootstrap the space economy. I can start seeing.
It can happen, yeah. But it does, as I said, it does require, in the previous video, it does require a lot of will, a lot of manpower, a lot of people who really want to go to space, and people who have the
Yeah,
expertise.
I'm really trying to see like how can sort of like how can it happen without like an external force, like an entire country forcing it to happen? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Out of people,
I mean,
of
companies
their own
started doing it now,
self-interest.
right?
Yeah.
But it does require a massive will, because at the moment, like the technologies, like rocket technologies, like you need to have a massive backing, public backing, like from public tax, basically, right? NASA is funded by public tax, and all the space stations are funded by public tax. Even if SpaceX, it was a company, but they had to make a deal with NASA to get the rocket to space, right? Like it's and not just that, because rockets can carry nuclear weapons. You
Of
know?
course. Well, a
Yeah, I
rocket,
mean,
a
you
rocket
can't-
is a
You
weapon.
can't just be a country that's like, all right, let's go to space. Like, no, you won't be allowed by other
Yeah.
countries. But you're not allowed to have rockets. Like, for example, North Korea said, like, we're gonna send rockets. Like, no, and then they do it anyway.
I think a rocket equals a missile, essentially.
They are because you can carry. Let's say like
Even without carrying, right? You just
you can, yeah. It's always a huge risk, and yeah, that's why countries will to have space exploration, because it's dangerous in a way.
Yeah, so now just to recap, we have sort of, I'm trying to figure out how can we peacefully transition into space. But the thing is, if once countries get involved, man, things can get really risky, man. Especially if they start rubbing on each other's shoulders the wrong way.
Yeah.
So I would hope all of this
Even now,
happens.
like Russia, because Russia's war, they have opted out of the space program.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like what the hell, like
Must have
it's
been
never
awkward in the International Space Center. Man.
Yeah, like the how do you say the astronauts?
Cosmonauts.
Yeah, cosmonauts. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what they say in the Russian way. The cosmonauts cannot go with astronauts anymore.
Mental.
Yeah, because that's the thing. Like because of I don't want to say small conflict, but because of such conflicts that can pop up, it can ruin relationships between countries, and it can ruin space exploration itself.
Itself, yeah, the laws, basically laws, regulations, customs, culture, public perception.
Yeah,
Could
conflict.
Yeah, anything could happen. Yeah, so it's if people do
It's
it
a fragile
yeah,
cooperation.
yeah.
Very fragile.
If this goes haywire, then we're just basically not going into space.
Yeah, we're just stuck here.
Yeah, so to move on, let's say none of this is a problem. The next sort of speed forward a bit more.
Yeah.
I'm really interested in like how solar systems can start dealing with each other in terms of the economy.
Solar system.
And the solar system. So once we start colonizing solar systems, the next one. I guess stage one is we're gonna seed them, and we are gonna start needing to support them. Like a digital or like a ethereal umbilical cord transferring resources. So initially, probably we're going to start doing that. I think we mentioned probably it'll be entirely robotic first and whatnot.
Mhm.
However, it turns out probably a lot of resources, would be transferred to each solar system as we start colonizing them.
Yeah.
And then after a while, we have to start weaning them off. They have to be self-sustaining.
Like for example, the seeding it's gonna be multiple, as you said, concentric layers of things going out, ships going out. So the first layer of exploration ships contain the seeding, and the second layer contains materials and more materials and some other things, right? And then
Robots,
eventually it will
biological
stop
life. Yeah.
until they become independent, right? And then in the solar systems that they inhabit, perhaps they could explore other planets in that solar system. It's the one they're going to. Maybe they can get resources from there, so they don't need our solar system anymore. so they become solar system independent, right?
Mm.
And then how can we trade between solar systems?
Yeah.
Like that's a
Once they start becoming self-sufficient,
yeah.
like
How
do we deal?
I mean, do they want to trade with us, or do you want to trade with? I mean, physical trading, physical stuff, right? It takes a long time to travel, as we said. Like the distances are not short; they're massive, and because of that, perhaps it might be unrealistic to trade stuff, physical stuff, you know, but it might be more reasonable to trade digital stuff, right? Digital items and maybe knowledge, right? So the things you can do in another solar system, it cannot do in our solar system, right? In terms of research, perhaps, or some sort of genetic modification, some sort of scientific knowledge that you can do over there, but you can't do here. And some sort of testing, like gravity testing, right? If their sun is heavier or bigger than our sun, perhaps they can test gravity over there, and they can send the knowledge back, and perhaps we can trade knowledge, and economy can be more and more digital and more knowledge based rather than physical based. Perhaps that could sustain solar systems. But even then, because light travels so far, like it takes 4 years to go to the closest solar system.
Why is light so slow?
Why is light so slow? Yeah, that's the speed limit of the universe, unfortunately. But yeah, even then, it would take 4 years for the person to send the knowledge to
closest,
us. The closest, yeah, it would take even more longer. Yeah, so. And you don't even know whether the light that sent out, the information like the sun, what if it get blocked along the way by some asteroid or another rogue planet or something, and the signal got blocked, and then the knowledge never got sent. Right? So things can happen, and yeah, so economy-wise, it's possible, right, to trade between solar system, but we're talking about a much longer time span, right? It's difficult to think for us because we're trading in seconds.
In such short time spans.
Yeah, we exist short time spans. The global economy is trading in massive amounts within seconds or milliseconds because they're all algorithmic, right? But now we're talking much bigger, like 4 years of one trading to take place between the closest solar system, right? So, perhaps do they want to trade with us? Perhaps they don't want to. They just want to be like, all right, I'll just have I don't give a shit about Earth anymore, or the Earth solar system. So we're like, okay, let's stop. Just chill here until let's be self-independent and don't care about that.
Isolationist.
Yeah, isolationist might become more attractive.
Yeah, one thing. I think the one huge wild card nowadays is quantum anything, quantum computers, any quantum technology. We have no idea how it's going to go, but one example of trading could be of quantum particles, quantum entangled particles.
Okay.
I have no idea how. Right now, the only thing we know of
that would break the speed of light limit, but.
The thing is, you can't communicate with it. As far as we know, you can't communicate with it.
Yes.
Faster than light, but you can. I guess maybe you can communicate at the speed of light without light having to travel. Maybe we'll figure that out in the future. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
And if whether that's the case or not, nowadays the only use for it that we have is encryption keys, meaning we can send an encrypted message to the entire universe or all other local solar systems, but only the person with the corresponding key can actually open it and read it. And if it's quantum particles, then you can be sure that it's safe. But hypothetically, if you figure out a quantum way of sending messages, maybe at the speed of light, somehow.
Yeah.
Then we wouldn't even have the light issue.
I mean, the light travel. I mean, right now,
as in being blocked.
Yeah. I mean, anything that travel. For example, like our cell towers are emitting radio wave, which is light, right? And then the phone is picking up the light, and the light is travel from the cell tower to here, and they can get blocked by buildings and stuff, and we don't get signal enough, right? So, or if you go underground, right? So, as a result, perhaps things to communicate, something needs to travel somewhere, right? I mean, if it's light, then it would travel at the speed of light. Quantum doesn't need to have speed of light. The radio rays already travel the speed of light with their light. Right? It's not about just because you have a lower or higher frequency doesn't mean it will travel less faster. It still travel the same speed.
Yeah.
The frequency doesn't change it. So X-rays travel the same.
Yeah, they're all light
Yeah,
waves.
they're all light. Anyway, yeah. So if we travel, if another solar system sent some sort of waves to us, right? A radio wave, microwaves, which are easy to travel than because high energy waves, they tend to lose energy over time and they just like lose signal. But radio waves can travel, for a much longer distance because they have less energy, less frequency. But yeah, so perhaps they will send something to us, and then it will take 4 years to reach us, and then we get the result, and it's like, oh wow, the higher gravity on that sun, right? Perhaps give us more physical abilities or something, right? But the Superman thing, right? The Superman.
Oh yeah, if you do 1 billion experiments over all the different solar systems.
Yeah, so perhaps
we
human physical abilities might be enhanced because of the higher gravity. I don't know, whatever. The Superman approach, right? Supermans are normal people on their planet. Yeah, but because they're on our planet, which are much have a lot more oxygen and a lot more sunlight, right? And their bodies absorb more energy, and they become very strong. Who knows, right? So they will send us some sort of research, and then we will look at it and like, oh, this is very valuable, and then we will send our own research back to them, which will enhance their own survival capabilities or independence capabilities, right? How to build a house in a high gravity environment. So we will perhaps send that back.
How to manipulate space itself.
Yeah. So anything. Yes.
Yeah, it could be a lot of things.
So economy perhaps could happen, but a much higher time span, longer time span.
In terms of physical resources. So to linger on that point a bit further, because our lifespans are so short,
yes,
traveling for
90 years
20
at best.
Yeah, nowadays traveling for like 20 years, even if it's all robots sending resources. Traveling 20 decades to send resources seems like a very long time, but on the galactic scale, that's okay,
it's very short, galactic scale.
Yeah.
Also, solar system scale.
If we have if we start being able to think on a more long-term basis, I think the transport of physical goods could be okay, entirely fine. But it requires a cultural shift.
It requires a mindset that think in higher time spans. Yeah, or maybe a generational time spans, which are completely alien to us.
Nowadays, because
nowadays,
our attention span.
But it wasn't that alien in the past because many stories were passed down verbally for generations without much disturbance in the story, without much change. So people have thought about how to bury their ancestor and how to they think about these things for a much longer time span because they don't have the more technology, right? But now because of the more technology that we have and the globalization, our time spans are much shorter. The thinking and our cultural time spans are much shorter. Perhaps space travel can widen that again, change that back again, where we have to think in long term, much long term, to enable such economies to take place.
And that's a very good point you made, where if space travel and living in space and even talking to people and playing with people in other solar systems becomes normal,
yes,
that might be part of a cultural shift that gets humanity as a whole to just think more long-term naturally.
A funny example just popped out in my mind. Let's say you want to play chess with someone from another solar system, right? So you make one move, and then you send that information that you made that move, and then it took 4 years to go there, right? And then 4 years to come back, and the other person made another move.
4 years.
4 years in the future. So it took 8 years for the whole thing to take place.
Imagine if it's your kid or your dad. You know what I mean?
You started your game when you were 5 years old, and then by age
90,
you're 13. You're 13, and you made one move.
Oh, dude, that could be another cultural thing. Could be some kind of game that you play throughout the generations.
Yeah,
you carry on your game in place of your dad or something like that.
Yeah. So a game perhaps that takes place generations with another solar system. So the people
family or tribe and
people over there, we play chess with them, but in a very funny 8 years long way.
That'd be amazing.
Yeah.
I want you to sort of provide. So of course no one really knows what this will look like, but I think it's possible, and ideal, really, because if you want, the topic being how do we make the universe alive, if you want to grow at a larger and larger scale, we need to start being able to think over a much wider physical space, but also time, over longer time spans. So it does require cultural shift, cultural mindset, and I think like if something about the economy, I don't know what it would look like, but because transferring resources is basically the economy, right? Part of the economy. Something about that, maybe there's like a some secret formula there that will allow us to on top of the cultural shift,
Yeah.
to make that happen. I want you to sort of give an analogy, even though we don't know what it would look like. Like, in a sense, we have a version of that already, but by analogy, where our own body cells interact and sort of like trade, in a sense, quote unquote, with each other. Each of them do a function, and they get oxygen, glucose, nutrients.
Yes.
The cells of our intestines don't hog up all the food, keep it for themselves. The cells in our lungs don't just keep all the oxygen for themselves.
There's a circulation system taking place in our body that's specialized to circulate stuff.
Exactly.
Like not just blood, oxygen, waste. Like any other. Like
in a sense, that is an economy.
It's an economy, yeah.
That.
So, and for example, an interesting economy is glucose distribution. So the brain requires the most. It's like airplane fuel. Airplanes require very pure fuel compared to cars. So the brain requires a very highly condensed pure glucose because the brain is extremely energy intensive and it can die very fast. So if you don't get oxygen or glucose within 5 minutes, it will die off. Extremely dead. So the whole body, the glucose, the brain hogs up a lot of glucose because the trading happens because one system takes up a lot of the resources, and then the brain required because it required the whole body to function, right? So, but then the glucose go to the brain. Most of the glucose go to the brain, and then the rest is distributed. And then also, if you train your muscle and your muscle have a lot more mitochondria, a lot more energy intensive muscles requires more glucose, right? So some of the glucose don't go to your fat and go to your muscles, right? So there's a distribution taking place of trading taking place where there is a need for something, and then the body circulation will fulfill that need. If there is not just a need, but as a push or evolutionary challenge, right? Some sort of evolutionary stress that can change the distribution of nutrients in our bodies.
It's amazing how our sort of cells just all collaborate with each other, right?
Yes.
We just take it for granted. But yeah, I wonder how it can look like in space within all the solar systems. I have no idea. But one thing I can say, that might play a part in this is that there is a habitable zone of within the galaxy itself. Not all
Milky Way galaxy.
Within our Milky Way galaxy itself, not all solar systems are habitable.
No.
And there is actually like a nice little ring where if you're too far, it's not habitable. Too far away from the center, it's not habitable. If you're too close to the center, it's not habitable. There is a nice ring there. So
yes.
I can see like us pulling out resources from the center and pulling in resources from the outer areas to be towards the habitable solar systems.
Yes.
So meaning
we're talking about much longer time span, but perhaps robots can venture out into the other solar systems that cannot have that doesn't have a planet or a sun that can sustain us. But what they can do is they can extract resources from those planets, basically make them run dry, right? Like just grab all the iron and nickel and all the good stuff.
Strip mine them.
Just strip them all because nothing lives there anyway. Just strip them all and then but it would take a few thousand years to transport it. But if you strip an entire planet, right? It might take 10,000 years to do it, to strip the entire planet, right? But if we can do it and then we can send back all of those, let's say you dismantle the planet, right, by robots, massive robots perhaps, dismantle the planet in multiple different minerals and metals, and that planet gets separated out into multiple solar systems, right? It transport it out into
Mm.
the inner solar system that are life habitable. So we're just going to be waiting for 10,000 years later for like a massive batch of iron to just show up at our doorstep.
Or even, I'd reckon, if you go back to the earlier point of like space mining, space factories, it could be down the chain, and maybe even while traveling, it just gets built into something,
Yeah.
You don't know. And by the
Yeah.
end of it, it's a quantum computer that's pre-computed something
Yeah.
for you.
Yeah.
I don't know. You have no
I mean,
idea.
let's say if we do that on a large scale all the time, the times are much smaller, right? So if one trade to take place takes 10,000 years,
Mhm.
but if it's a chain of trade,
course, yeah.
yeah, so it might take 1,000 years because it's just one after another, right?
Yeah,
Thousand,
yeah,
thousand, yeah. So it's like a transport
Train.
yeah, a train of transport, right? But so I mean, the first will take 10,000 years, but then
Yeah.
the
It's
subsequent
continuously
ones,
coming, yeah.
continuously coming. The subsequent one will be 1,000 years.
So that is a form of an economy within our galaxy that could actually
Yes,
happen.
yeah,
It's super interesting. I have no idea what's going to be. Let's take a break and then
yeah. Let's take the break.
we'll resume for the last one.
Yeah.
So we haven't talked about aliens
Yes.
in all this time. Why not?
Well, it's a wild card. We don't know if they. First of all, we don't know if they exist or not. I mean, from talking about probability, yeah, they might exist, right? Not even if they're not intelligence, perhaps they are simple life forms could exist, and other planets could have life forms that we don't know about, and even our telescopes at the moment that we can see exoplanets, right? Because they make a shadow on the star, and we can see the what gases they have, because of the color changes, but we can't possibly tell from that data that life could be there or not. So we don't know.
Yeah.
But we assume everything we talked about so far. We're assuming aliens don't exist, and it's just us.
As a natural default, it's sort of like
It's
as
a
if
natural
alien.
default. Yeah.
The thing is, alien is like what you said. It's such a wild card that it's just hard to talk about.
Yeah. I mean, because of so many movies references about how aliens are supposed to be, so many imaginations, or so many. But I see aliens the way it's depicted in the movies very differently because we have always thought about monsters in the past, right? Monsters are things that we cannot understand. So if you live in a tribe, so anything outside the border of the tribe are monsters. So they are devils outside, right? The tigers that could kill us, right?
Dragon.
So it's a predatory instinct that we protected ourselves against, or our children against.
Ghosts, spirits,
So we come up
werewolves.
with monsters, right? And now our understanding gets bigger and bigger. Right now, we're not just a tribe, but now we have a much larger geographical nation, right? So anything outside the nations are monsters, right? And now we have the entire globe that we know about, right? We have mapped them. Most of it, most of the land, right? We mapped it. We know what things are. We know where. We know where the mountains are. We know where the seas are. But because of that, anything outside the planet became the monsters. So now the way
in movies, you mean?
In movies and media, right? Or the way cultural understanding of it
in our minds.
It's mostly in our minds. It's a predatory instinct that we defend against, right? Or prey instinct. We have a prey instinct that we want to defend against a predator. So any alien depiction that eat us, right? The alien depiction that use us for resources or invade us, right? Those are very primal fears that animals have. Now is projected towards the aliens, right? But true aliens, from scientific perspective, they could exist, but in very they could be widespread. Who knows? But it's most likely going to be bacteria or viruses.
Probably, most like because if you look at like what's it called, the
Cambrian explosion.
The Cambrian. I'm losing this word now. When it comes to aliens, the term used for why we don't see any aliens is the what paradox?
Fermi
paradox.
Paradox, yeah.
It's basically like a funnel. It's like a funnel, but like as a default assumption because so basically most life would be very, very primitive.
Yes.
For me personally, I fall into the camp that is basically says like I like the dark forest idea, as in not like it, but as in that seems quite compelling to me. Where if an alien exists, if aliens do exist, most likely, and if we encounter them, most likely they'll be so far ahead of us. And I mean, essentially, yeah, the Dark Forest basically says the reason we don't hear or see aliens is because anyone that makes themselves known gets killed. Because they're just a prey shouting out in a forest of predators.
Yeah. Not a good thing
Not
to
a
do.
smart thing to
Yeah.
to do, exactly. So anyway, but going slightly beyond that, if we see aliens, for the most part, they'll most likely be very far ahead of us technologically, or very far below us technologically.
Yeah.
For the sake of argument, I mean,
They're not even conscious at all, right? They're just
yeah, well,
stealths.
yeah, I mean, by being egocentric, we're like, yeah.
They
Or
don't
maybe
have
the ones that are
human consciousness.
Or maybe the ones that are far ahead of us have sort of mind melded, and we're like, oh no, they're not really conscious. They've just too advanced to be conscious. Because
yeah, they became, let's say
swarm
they became
Yeah.
one with the planet
Type of
right?
thing,
Yeah,
yeah.
so their minds melded
and then
with
our
the planet.
egos say, no, we're the ones that are conscious.
Yeah, we
man."
just destroy you guys. Or they became part of the tree consciousness or something that controlled the planet. Yeah, who knows? You know, like in Avatar, the movie Avatar, right? The aliens there, their consciousness is linked to the planet network itself, right? And they can even switch dead bodies to each other, to another consciousness. So, so things like that, you know, some aliens who have technology advanced could have those type of things that we cannot imagine. And then, and we probably, as egocentric and evil as we are, we're just going to kill them off or do something.
Exploit the hell out of them.
Exploit the hell out of them.
So I reckon a lot of things we've spoken about, especially like with the economy and the cultural shifts,
yes,
they still play a part. I don't think they've changed too much. The wild card basically is like, what technologies will the aliens provide or allow us to have, you know, or would they kill us off? So would we end up becoming more militaristic?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like it basically diverges like all the trajectories, but I think a lot of the core principles, underlying things we've spoken about are still at play. But again, I think we can end up doing an entire mini-series, so I'm just trying to refrain from going too far into it, because you can end up detracting from the larger conversation I want to have.
Yes.
And to go further back into it is, how do we make the universe alive? So now,
yes,
with what we've spoken about so far, you can perhaps get a glimpse of our entire galaxy being populated with human and perhaps intermixed with some alien life, with resources coming into the habitable
robotic
systems.
life as well. Yeah.
Robotic life as well. We want to give AIs a chance as well, you know.
Yeah, we're making them alive.
Yeah, so
trading on a galactic-wide scale.
Yeah, so we're now, our entire galaxy is alive. So now, like, that's not the universe. The universe is all the other galaxies that we see. You know, we see
countless galaxies.
Yeah, we can see the cosmic microwave background radiation as a good, like, I don't know. I feel when I see that, just that it gives us a glimpse of what the entire universe looks like, in a sense.
That we can see so far.
So far, yeah, and it's even bigger.
It's even bigger, yeah. There's like a sphere or like some sort of thing that we can not see past it for some reason, but if we move, we will be able to see more.
But our light cone would,
yeah. If light move, so if we move. Let's say this. Our current observational space of the universe is like this, but then because Earth is in the center,
but we have our light cone, so it's like it's gonna be like, I don't know.
But it's what goes out in every direction, right? And then if we move to a different planet, the telescopes on the different planet, very far away from us, they can probably see more of the universe.
Oh, especially if they've recorded it.
Yeah, because the observation moved, right, of the light, and so we probably see parts of the universe that we cannot possibly see. So that's part of the economy.
From one edge of our galaxy to the other.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
That's
so the other edge will see a different, more
That's
of the
super
universe.
interesting. So imagine, what was that telescope that allowed us to see Sagittarius A? The
radio telescopes that's spread across the globe.
Essentially a planet-wide.
Yeah. So they were coordinating multiple radio telescopes around the globe, that's placed around the globe, and they can basically point to the same object at the same time in the same at the same time span, and then basically because the light comes in very small packets, right? So they're basically waiting for light to come like globally, like from global with this wide telescope, and then they're waiting for light to basically bounce off, right? And that creates data, right? So from that data, those statistical data that come from the light bumps, and then they create an image out of that. Mind-blowingly, they create an image and of the Sagittarius A, which is the biggest supermassive black hole of our Milky Way galaxy, and it is absolutely massive. And not just that, we're able to, I mean, it's a picture, but it's not really a picture. We didn't really take a picture. It's more like a data that's visualized data, right? And
so now,
radio waves.
If we've colonized the entire galaxy,
but what if we could make a telescope, a galaxy-wide telescope, and basically, I mean, imagine the level of detail that could go in.
We can look at planets in other galaxies.
Yes, yes, and now basically our entire Milky Way swirl. Like think of the whole swirl as a massive lens,
large lens,
a huge galactic-wide lens, and I mean they can probably see the Big Bang itself. Who knows? That level of detail could go so far behind time that we can see the actual Big Bang. Like, wow.
Very deep in time.
Yeah, very deep in time.
So now imagine we do this and we end up seeing life forms in other galaxies like that we can't reach.
Yes. Even with light, it would be, even with traveling.
That means we would be seeing what they were like
millions of years
ago.
Millions.
Yeah.
That's
or millions of years. Imagine the close by ones would be millions.
The close by will be millions. Yeah, but the billions will very far.
That would be mad. So imagine now we have the entire galaxy at hand, and we know that there is life in our nearby galaxies, but we can't reach them because space is expanding so fast. But we know they were like, for example, let's say technologically advanced.
Yes.
Because we can see it. Like, that's insane. I'm sure we can take advantage of that information, right? So we're talking about how can we make the entire universe alive. Like, is there something we could do to take advantage of that? It feels like there should be.
Yes, that should be. I mean, if we think, I mean, we have resource constraints, intelligence constraints. Constraints exist because we live on the planet, and the planet has constraints, right? So once we reach galactic level, solar system level, our level of constraint will be so far ahead, so far big that we just have unlimited, effectively unlimited resources, right? Effectively. So that's why like this sort of exploration is such a, it's going to have a big reward, and not just unlimited resources, but also because our species will thrive for eternity, right? For people who cares about, for humanity to live, for life, or life itself to propagate towards time for billions of years, even more longer than it's on Earth. And I mean that's a success story, right? If the entire universe consists of life and consists of humans and consciousness, the things that the consciousness is is a very loose concept, but its ability to be aware of our own universe. That's I think that's the highest point of our consciousness, when we become aware that we exist in a universe.
Yeah. We are the universe understanding itself.
Exactly. We're made from the universe stuff itself, and stardust, the scientists love to call it. But now we are aware enough to understand the stars itself, right? So perhaps that is a success story, and how can we propagate that success towards the future by having a galactic-wide solar civilization, or galactic, or even go to a different galaxy. Let's go to Andromeda.
What I'd be imagining, right, like, is just say we don't know how to. So one of the problems with deep time that we know of, I mean, besides speculation, but with current trajectories, is the universe is just expanding so fast that at some point, several 100 billion years in the future, we're not going to see the galaxies that are close by us. We're only going to see our local galaxy cluster, just because it would have gone away from us. Perhaps, you know, perhaps either us or some life in other galaxies have end up figuring out a way of maybe contracting space or like something, right? Doing something to stop this from happening.
Oh, I don't think it's the stop.
I don't think it's gonna happen.
Yeah,
but like
that's
as an example, I'm just sort of trying to give an example of like to spark like the imagination of like something that could happen, right? So
it's like we're trying to push Mount Everest. To not stop growing, like
something like that. Yeah,
it's not gonna happen.
Fair enough. But I just want to linger on this point just to show like an example of like things that are capable, right? So maybe this itself would not be capable, but what would be possible is we can, if say with our galaxy-wide telescope, we can see life and a lot of things in very fine detail in our nearby galaxies, and we find one with life in it, and we start having a look at it. That basically means we can. There's a one-way communication, right? If they were super advanced and we're seeing them a billion years in the past or millions of years in the past, we're in a sense getting one-way communication. And if like especially if space is expanding, we're never really going to reach them properly. So like our past would have. So now that life there, if they were advanced and they could have figured out that, oh wait a minute, maybe there is a technology to pull galaxies towards, maybe only pull specific galaxies towards each other. Maybe, I don't know. Yeah. I'm very high speculation, but the point is, the key point is, we can still get technologies. At least we can get technologies from a galaxies that we've never traveled to. At a bare minimum, if there's a life in other galaxies that we cannot physically travel to, but there has been very advanced.
We can still learn from them.
There could be a one-way communication at a bare minimum.
It's not just life, guys.
Of course, yeah.
We can learn about other nebulas, stars, and star
sure.
formations, and all. Any like a galactic-wide telescope is so unbelievably big that we can zoom in. I mean, what's the odds that another civilization is not doing to us?
Yeah, exactly.
Perhaps they can actually zoom into Earth with a galactic-wide telescope.
Now.
Yeah. What I mean, we wouldn't know, but they will be looking in the future because the times, it will not look us now, but they will look us millions of years later.
Yeah.
But yeah, it will still be a massive it's a massive undertaking, and also we don't know what secrets lie in the universe with such a big. I mean, now we took a picture of the Sagittarius A. Like, what if we can actually take an actual picture of Sagittarius A? I mean, or a supermassive black hole. Like how big it is. I mean, can we discover things that perhaps the things inside the black hole with that telescope? Can we discover?
Oh, I'd love to experiment, or not me personally. I'd love to see the results of experiments of black hole.
Yeah, I mean, if we conquer the entire Milky Way galaxy,
for sure we would.
I mean, of course, we will just send things to the Sagittarius A, and let's see what's the what happens if it's just stretched to eternity in there. Become pasta.
Yeah. So yeah, just to summarize, I actually don't have the secret knowledge of how to go hop onto the next galaxies, but it's a nice thought that if such technologies exist, it could, like there should be a way, as in, I don't know, like if such technology exists, it should be possible. As in, I don't see any major
to contract space.
It just say if it's possible to contract space and you need other galaxies to do it, like it would be on a much longer time span. But I don't.
Billion years.
I don't see any of course, yeah. I don't see any and there's a lot of things we have to conquer and blah 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 blah. But it's a possible trajectory as long as if that tech exists.
I mean, galaxies are moving to each other. That's why our Milky Way is going to collapse or merge with Andromeda, because those two galaxies are moving. So every galaxy in the universe are moving, right? And they have clusters, and some galaxies are actually big clusters, and they're all connected in some gravitational way. But the thing with the universe expansion is that space itself is expanding. So no matter how far you move, it's like you're
problem, isn't it?
it's like you're moving in a tide, right? So the tide is the water itself is moving, right? So if you swim against the tide,
if the tide is moving faster than you can swim.
Yeah, you just swept away, right? So it's basically like that. So no matter
if
how
you
far,
understand what causes it to contract and expand.
but the thing is, we can't stop the tide because the moon is there.
Of
Right.
course, no,
Yeah,
what
so-
I'm saying,
yeah, so same thing
that's
can
why even if we understand, we might not.
be able to do it, because
That's fair.
the natural forces so far beyond
That's
us.
fair, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, but I hope there is a way, you know.
Yeah.
I really hope there is, but I don't see any major. As in, of course, like right now in the present.
I mean, we have a lot of nearby galaxies around us.
Of
you know,
course,
like
yeah.
that we can technically
Oh yeah,
explore.
that would
Yeah,
be.
so it's not just
And-
we don't have to the entire universe.
Well, there's Andromeda, and then there's a few
A
dwarf
few
galaxies.
others, that around us that we can go out and chill.
Yeah. It's a nice thought.
Yes, it's a very nice thought.
Thanks for listening to us.
Yes, that's the part 2 of how to make the universe alive. I hope you enjoyed our deep and dreamy and maybe insane conversation.
Yeah. So sorry
But-
for all the tangents we end up going
Yes,
off on.
but please, if you have any thing to say in the comments. If you have any expertise that from your work or your knowledge that you want to correct,
Yeah.
please correct us on
Yeah.
things that we're saying.
These are just conversations we have
Yeah.
regularly. We thought we'd
Yeah,
share
we
it to
just-
the world.
Yeah, so please say it in the comments and enjoy it. We will come out with the next podcast soon.
Nice. All right.
All right,
Cheers.
see you.
Bye.